This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's always great and exciting to talk to our good friend Eric Boehlert of Pressrun.media. If you've not subscribed, you definitely want to do so. The most fearless media commentary there is, and we're thankful for that. Eric, how are you, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. So it's well, first of all, let me get your take on the biggest story of the week, and that is the Senate's refusal to carve out the filibuster one time.
Yeah.
For everyone. And what's your take on how the media has even covered that story?
It typical, and this goes back to the Obama years. In obstruction is works for Republicans. So I understand this is slightly different. There was two Democrats, but completely left out of the context is we have this 50-50 Senate. In the past, a Democratic president might be able to rely on 2 or 3 or 4 Republican votes, depending on what the legislation is. Biden can't rely on them for anything. So, the press focuses on 50-50 and he lost 2 Democrats and that's a failure for Biden. And it just rewards Republicans for obstructing everything. McConnell absolutely perfected this strategy under Obama. The most famous example to me is after the Sandy Hook. Obama spent 6 months, selling to the country this background gun bill, had 90% public support, couldn't get any Republican votes, and Senator Toomey at the time, who I shouldn't say couldn't get any, got 1 or 2, and Senator Republican from Pennsylvania at the time said, who was helping Obama, said my colleagues don't want him to have a win. They just don't want him to have a win. And so they're just continuing that. And we're seeing that with the filibuster. We saw that with COVID relief, could not get 1 Republican vote in the House or the Senate. Again, this is a bill that had 80-90% public support. They don't want to give Biden a victory. So the press kind of looks past that and they blame Biden. Hey, why can't, Chuck Todd on Meet the Press over the weekend, why hasn't Biden been able to create this coalition with 5 or 6 moderate Republicans? Why can't he get Susan Collins and Mitt Romney to vote, for the Voting Rights Act and things like that? As if this is just a simple process. And it's because the press doesn't want to acknowledge how radical the Republican Party has come. And just real quick on Senator Sinema, this week is Biden's 1 year anniversary. Just an avalanche of negative press, negative analysis, and his polls are down. He went from 49 to 42% in the last half year. His polls are down. There was a poll out this week from Arizona. Sinema's polling at 8% among Democrats. You think that would be kind of a big story?
Yeah.
This is a woman who has categorically ended her political career by going against the Democratic Party and going against a popular president among Democrats. But the media is only interested in Biden's polling numbers. And just real quick, and again, this relates to the voting rights bill and things like that, at Biden's press conference, and other places, well, the Democratic Party is divided. They're divided. They couldn't get this bill passed. And as Biden pointed out, he said, I got 48 out of 50. This is not a divided party. Yeah. You throw in the entire House caucus, I think it's something like 273 versus 2. Yeah. This is not a divided party, but the media really love to play up that idea that, it's fracturing under Biden's feet at this point or something.
Well, and it also goes to show how the media has become complicit in obstructionism, to your point.
Oh, yeah.
The original Voting Rights Act, what enabled it to be passed was the media's coverage of the lack of voting rights.
Right.
Today, there's less coverage. I mean, let's be clear. Let's just talk about what's going on. At least 19 states have these new voter suppression laws. That would have been the purpose for this bill. How many mainstream or Beltway media have even covered that story, Eric? I don't know of one.
Yeah, no, we read about Georgia. We read about a couple states. You don't read about, a third of the country. And they don't call it voter suppression. I wrote that story a year ago. The press just absolutely refuses to call these voter suppression. Oh, you can't say voter suppression. That makes it sound like the Republican Party doesn't want people to vote. That makes it sound like they're not democratic. They're not in the mainstream. Of course, the Republican Party is in the mainstream. They're a center-right party. So, it's a holdover of these ridiculous semantics games the press played in order to not tell the truth about Trump. He wasn't a liar. He wasn't a sociopath. He wasn't, any of those. He wasn't a racist. He trafficked in race characteristics or race. They didn't even call it race baiting. I can't even remember the stupid phrase they used. And, he pushed falsehoods and exaggerations. And so he's not a liar. He's not a racist. And the Republican Party doesn't stand for voter suppression. So it's the fear of telling the truth about the Republican Party. And it goes to the obstructionism, and it goes to, voter suppression, and it goes to lots of other things. The Republican Party has played the press because the press, no matter what the Republican Party does, the press, by definition, by its own self-imposed rules, says it's the mainstream. Well, if the Republican Party is doing it, it's mainstream. It's not dangerous. It's not undemocratic because this is a mainstream entity. They would never suppress the vote. They would try to take the vote. But if you read the reporting on what these laws do, it's a clear acknowledgement. Obviously, they're trying to take away the right of people to vote. They're not even trying to hide it.
1965, March 7th. We're coming up on that anniversary as we spend every year in Selma, folks. ABC Sunday night movie, The Trial at Nuremberg.
That's right.
And this is what mainstream media did then.
Mm-hmm.
They broke in live on television for everybody to see, including a president, Lyndon Johnson, who had said to Dr. King, we just passed the 64 Civil Rights Act. I don't think I can get a Voting Rights Act passed so close to that, so close behind it.
Yeah.
But when the media showed those pictures from Selma,
right,
and then they covered the stories after that, the killings of a white minister, the Reverend James Reed, the killing of Viola Liuzzo and others. I tell you, if you ever want to just be amused, sometimes listen to sometimes the LBJ tapes are better than the Nixon tapes, because you hear him call George Wallace and say, "Hey man, what are you doing? You killing white people." so I got to do something. But that wasn't liberal media. That was just reporting the facts. People were being massacred in Selma. Right. But today, it's not even story. But so here's the other thing that blew my mind. More MIP after this message. Biden doesn't hold press conferences. Then he holds press conferences, Eric, and all the media, at least, is tweeting, it was too long. I mean, if that's not a transparent, that this guy just cannot do anything right for them. And don't get me wrong, he's not perfect. There's some things we got to work out. But the man holds press conference for 2 hours, and it was too long. And then and I guess they feel it was too long, and that he was also, in their view, somewhat incoherent. Trump wasn't. You never incoherent,
right? I mean, it's amazing. It's theater criticism, which has replaced political analysis. So, and look, there's a few things with those press conference. The press wants these press conferences, I think, because they think they're all going to be like Trump press conferences. There's going to be entertaining. There's going to be gaffes. There's going to be these confrontations. There's going to be yelling. There's going to be drama. And, Biden press conferences are like Obama press conferences. They're pretty boring. Yeah. They're pretty boring. And if you really want to get into the weeds and you want to hear some 6 or 7 minute answers on foreign policy and domestic policy, that is the place to go. If you're looking for entertainment, probably not going to find it. So I think the code for too long was boring. It was boring, Yeah. And you're right. He got hit. Oh, he hasn't had a formal press conference since March. Oh, they're hiding him. Oh, he's old. Oh, he answered 60 questions, and as I pointed out on Twitter, did not tell one flat out lie. CNN didn't have to rush onto their website, a fact check of 9 different just crazy lies that he told. And again, if you, so, he hasn't had one since March. Why is he hiding? He should do these all the time. If you watch that, I don't think anyone watched that and said, oh, he's got to do these every 8 weeks. Oh, why don't we have these more often? There are other ways to communicate with the American people. It's fine that he does them. Nothing really comes of it. I mean, it's fine. It's a non-event. But yeah, it's too. If he had stopped after 40 minutes and taken 9 questions, oh, what's he hiding? Oh, it's too. It's Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? It's all kind of silly. It's all kind of this beltway theatrics instead of actual political analysis and things like that.
Eric Boehlert also, folks, reminds us in Press Run, and that's why we encourage you all to read it, just to give us a reminder of what did happen to the Obama administration. First year, here was a headline: Is President Obama's Carter moment nearing? A lead sentence from the Associated Press: Barack Obama's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year off to a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad start. Washington Post: A year into his presidency, President Obama faces a polarized nation and souring public assessments of his efforts to change Washington. And we see the same thing with Biden, don't we, Eric? But at the same time, a little bit of a desire, it seems, to rehabilitate Trump.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's the unspoken part of all of this, and I've said this elsewhere, and I really do think it's the case. It's just my hunch. Why is there such this laser-like focus on trying to highlight Biden's failures? The Washington Post did a 3,000 word year-long, a year look back at his first year. I counted, 43 paragraphs, 3,000 words, not one sentence about 6.4 million jobs added under Obama, something no first-year president has done since they started keeping records in 1939. If you're going to do a 3,000 word piece on Biden's first year in office, and you don't type one sentence about the record-shattering job growth, there's another motivation in play. Journalists don't just accidentally leave that part out. They don't accidentally leave the 3.9 unemployment, full employment, highest wages ever on record. You don't just accidentally leave that stuff out. And to your point, I think all of this kind of this pile-on, this breathless pile-on that we did not see 4 years ago at Trump's 1-year anniversary when he was at 37%. There were no obituaries. There were no what's going to happen to the Trump presidency. This is unique to Biden. And again, I don't know if the press wants Trump to be president again. I think they want him to have a close re-election in 2024. I think they see that as entertaining and it would be fun. So I feel like they see their job as let's keep things close. Let's make sure Biden doesn't do too well. This is either conscious or subconscious. And so let's just needle this guy to death. Let's leave out his historic accomplishments. Let's read off the GOP talking points. Let's keep this playing field level. And so if Trump wants to jump back in, it'll be close. And then we can cover that and it'll be a lot of fun for everybody.
More MIP after this message. You made me think of something too. Some things are not that distant from other things in life. What you just described sounds to me like, yeah, they may not want to be president, but there are people who enjoy going into the shark cage. In the cage, going down and getting this close to the shark. Now, of course, they don't want shark to eat them up.
Right.
Try to open the cage, but there's a thrill and an adrenaline. And maybe that's what Trump is. But here's what's interesting. You also wrote about this. The press conference Biden gave for an hour and 40 minutes, however long it was, and everyone he's given was 100 times more than Trump has given the mainstream in the Beltway. He canceled his January 6th press conference, so to speak.
Yeah.
So no one's talking about his insensibility.
He's absolutely hiding. And I was kind of amazed this hasn't gotten more attention since he left office. And I wrote my piece the day he called into NPR. We can talk about that. But for a year, Trump has been in hiding. Yes, he gives interviews to Fox and the Loonies and Mike Lindell and all these crazies. He hadn't sat down for a live interview or answered live questions to a single mainstream journalist in a year, which is kind of remarkable. And then he did, just coincidentally, that day he called into NPR and did an interview with Steve Inskeep. And I thought NPR did a better job than usual in terms of trying to hold Trump accountable. I think it's super important not to interview Trump live on radio or not live on TV because he just steamrolls. And then Trump cut the interview short by about half the time. He just kind of hung up that I'm done. But it's very interesting. I mean, the Trump coverage is, he's a lock. He's got the nomination sewn up. He would probably beat Biden. He's this, super savvy, 10-ton gorilla on the political landscape. He refuses to give interviews. He has no social media presence. He's kicked off Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. They're trying to start these right-wing platforms. They all go nowhere. He is buried in legal fees right now. Just this week, we had New York City, and we have now Fulton County with a grand jury. It's rather astounding. If there were a Democrat, if Hillary Clinton were on the sidelines in some scenario where she wanted to run, refused to talk to the press, had been kicked off every social media platform, had lawsuits lining up outside her door, the press would not say, oh, Hillary Clinton's sitting pretty. Hillary Clinton's got the Republican Party right where she wants it. It would be, it's over. You can't run for president doing any of those things. But that goes to the point, I think they just want him to run again. So they're not going to point out the obvious that his legal challenges are mounting and they're real. And he lost his Supreme Court. He lost two Supreme Court rulings. One, with the January 6th info and then his tax info. It's interesting to me, just real quick, the Supreme Court is obviously in the pocket of the Republican Party. They will do whatever policy the Republican Party wants. They will make up justifications for anything. The Supreme Court has no interest in protecting Donald Trump. They are not going to protect him. And I think that is a really telling revelation in the last month or so. And again, that has major implications for 2024. And the press is just kind of sleepwalking past all this because, to your point, they really want him to run again because it would be fun.
Yeah, I think you just said something, too. I mean, where the decisions they're making, especially when a number of them are there because of Trump. Yeah. Somebody picked up the phone.
Yeah.
That to me, that just didn't seem organic, 8-1. Now, we know Clarence Thomas has just always been off his rocker. Yeah. But that didn't seem organic to me. Somebody made a phone call.
Yeah.
And maybe, this isn't objective journalism. This is just speculation, folks. But yeah. The person who's really the architect of the Republican court packing,
yes,
it's been happening at the federal level and in the Court of Appeals, all these for a decade almost.
Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell. So I wouldn't be surprised if he picked up the phone, man.
Yeah.
And said, "Hey, no. This is going to be your ruling."
Yeah.
On this, I didn't think about that.
Not only is this going to be your ruling in terms of policy, but more importantly on Trump. Like, you're not there to protect Trump. It's going to sully your reputation. It's speculation, but it's clear to me that they will do, that mask mandate was one of the most moronic, illogical, rulings I've ever seen in my life. But they'll absolutely do that because that's GOP policy. They're not going to lose sleep trying to save Trump. And if he hasn't figured that out, his aides have, and that's a problem because I think they thought that was their backstop for all of this stuff, and they routinely decided, nah, we're not going to do that.
There's irony here too, because the Boehlert holds as sacred and sacrosanct the Supreme Court, and so there's not even criticism of them. Yet the court is so aware of media. They were releasing statements this week that you never would have seen about whether or not Gorsuch has been told to wear a mask and whatnot. So I mean, maybe the media ought to take cue from that. But so wait a minute, maybe we need to look at them a little bit more closely.
Yeah.
And see, folks, Eric is the only one making this analysis, and the decisions that they're making and how they are related to Republican policy. Not to mention all the other decisions the Supreme Courts make. They're big decisions they make to make big news, but a lot of little decisions they make
right
every day. They relate to business and commerce that people don't even know about, that aren't the best thing in the world either. Lastly, one of the other things, obviously, the Biden obituaries are being written, and as we've discussed, but you've also written about this fixation around inflation. He is solely responsible.
Yeah.
Inflation.
Well, there was a global pandemic, and so there's global inflation. If you read the coverage, not only, yes, the press absolutely decided that the entire U.S. economy is all about inflation. It's not about interest rates. It's not about job gains. It's not about consumer spending. It's not about house sales. It's inflation. Right. It's a great scare story. They just go bonkers with it. And there's almost no reference to any of the coverage that this is a global phenomena. Russia, Mexico, France, England, Belgium, Spain, Germany, Canada, everyone set a record inflation last year. Everyone. And if you put it in context, then you realize because Republicans, and which the media has absolutely echoed, Republicans have pretended U.S. inflation is Biden's fault. He spends so much money. He's created this inflation. That doesn't even make sense if you know anything about economics. You can't have a 10-year spending bill spike inflation the next month. But more importantly, this is because we had a global pandemic, and it changed supply and demand. And specifically, the reason inflation took off in the U.S. is because the U.S. economy rebounded so much faster and so much stronger than anyone thought.
Right.
Last March and last April, the question was, will the U.S. economy ever rebound? And now it's rebounded too quickly. But Biden doesn't get any credit for the fast rebound. He just gets hit with the inflation, and the press pretends this is only happening in the United States when it has infected every major economy on the planet. And that's real quick. That's the other thing that drives me crazy with the COVID coverage. Oh, Biden didn't end COVID. Oh, Biden didn't see this coming. Like Germany did? Like France contained this global mutating virus? There's not a country on the globe that has figured out COVID. And this idea that I would understand if the United States COVID was running rampant while all of Europe was back to normal and all of Europe had no cases, I would say, yes, this guy screwed up. But last time I checked, the president cannot stop a mutating virus that's traveling the globe. We can do the best. We can try to have policies in place. We can try to, be smart about it. But my God, are we pretending it's only happening in the United States the way we're pretending inflation is only happening in the United States? It's just bizarre.
I wonder how the press is covering the other leaders. The international press covers other leaders around the world. Are they blaming them?
Good point. And I looked at a lot of the coverage, and no, absolutely not. If the reason we know inflation is up all around the world is, Reuters has an international bureau, and if you seek it out, you can find stuff about Spain's inflation. But no, of course not. It's not, the first sentence doesn't have Spain's leader in the paragraph about inflation. It's all very mechanical. These are why the numbers are up, et cetera, et cetera. Only in the United States does the coverage immediately, all of the inflation coverage is immediately tied to Biden.
Yeah. I know I said lastly, but one other point I want to raise, Rupert Murdoch, you've written about him.
Yeah.
And raised the question, how many people might he have killed?
Yeah. Through
discouraging masks and vaccines on Fox.
Yeah, we'll never know. I mean, obviously, thousands, tens of thousands. The Fox News audience is super susceptible. The U.S. vaccination rate stalled at 60%. It should have been 70 easily. A great rollout would have been 80%, which I think probably Canada and other countries are. But, the United States is the only country in the world that has an organized mainstream political party that's dedicated to spreading the virus. And it's the only country that has a $1 billion media industry, right-wing media industry, that's dedicated to spreading the virus. In that column, I pointed out, Murdoch has properties all over the world, most notably in England and in Australia. Those properties are not doing to those countries what Fox News has done to the United States. Those properties do not tell their readers and viewers the vaccine will kill you the way Fox does on a regular basis. He has decided to unleash something special in the United States that he will not do in Australia and he will not do in England. And, that's why I say, he is a cancer on this country for sure.
One America News finally dropped by AT&T.
Yeah.
TV. That's good news. It was alarming to see that on a television guide that this is an option. This is crazy. That's not a real network.
Yeah, and yet they're allowed into the White House for press briefings and things like that. I mean, they're just, that's the other reason I pointed out in my column why Murdoch is doing that with Fox News and just going completely, anti-science, anti-vaccine. He doesn't care if people die because he will not allow Fox News to be outflanked to the right. That happened right after the election with Newsmax and OAN, and their numbers spiked because they immediately embraced the big lie. Fox News, if you go back to November, December 2020, it was a little slow to embrace Trump's claims, which they now do. And they lost their audience. They lost a chunk of their audience. And so Murdoch is committed to never being outflanked to the right. So he will do as I pointed out, for him, it's preferable. People dying is preferable to them changing the channel.
That's a frightening turn of phrase, a true one though, folks.
Yeah.
Folks, if you think about it, if you subscribe to Pressrun.media, you actually might. Eric's analysis of the mainstream and Beltway press, his critique and his fact checking and fact correcting is more news substance than you get from the mainstream and Beltway press. So just reading Eric's critique will actually give you more objective, factual news and information, as it seems. So, folks, I encourage you so that you're clear. I had had a relative the other day tell me, and that's why I asked that question.
Yeah.
On that story specifically, Mark Biden didn't do what he said he was going to do. He's caused all this inflation. And I know where that comes from because, again, this is a relative who lives. Their primary source of information is Facebook. Lives on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, folks, that's why it's important we have these conversations and we're very careful about what we're sharing on social media. And even I was speaking with Dr. Chavis on our last show, Dr. Ben Chavis of the Black Press. And you know, I don't know if you saw it, the press conference. Did you see the question Kristen Welker asked Biden about black voters and them feeling betrayed? I don't know if you caught that, Eric. Yeah. And I mean, it was a good question, and her question was an accurate question because a lot of black voters do feel betrayed.
Sure.
But Ben then said, "Why is there not greater coverage of Manchin and Sinema betraying black voters?" Because I think the 13% of black voters in West Virginia got Manchin elected. See, in a lot of these races in places like Arizona, the black vote makes the difference when the white vote is split.
Good point.
So is Biden betraying, or, you know, so but they're not covered in that way.
No.
It's like, we got to stop Biden because you're right. We want to get back in the Shark Tank with Trump because that's exciting. It's fun covering King Kong until King Kong escapes and eats us all up. You know, that's just kind of the mentality. Pressrun.media, fearless media commentary. We appreciate him as always, Eric. Thanks, man.
All right, my pleasure. Have a great week.
Okay, you too, man. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Not all bread is created equal. And if you like yours soft, fluffy, moist, and delicious, then Hero Bread and Buns should be your first choice. But Hero Bread isn't just about taste and texture. It's high in fiber with ultra-low net carbs with 0 grams of sugar. Order today at hero.co and use the code AH10 to get 10% off your first purchase. That's AH10 at hero.co, HERO.co for 10% off your first purchase.